Military on home soil? Tensions in Minnesota are boiling over after President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act against protests. Now the state's governor is begging him to turn the temperature down. What comes next? Minnesota governor urges Trump to turn the temperature down after Insurrection Act threat. As protests escalate in Minneapolis after multiple controversial federal immigration actions, President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a law that could bring U.S. troops into the streets. Now, Minnesota's governor is calling for calm and urging Trump to back off. Why this matters? Threatening to use the Insurrection Act, a rarely used law that lets the federal government deploy troops domestically against protesters, raises serious constitutional and political questions about federal power, state authority, and civil liberties. Full story. Background events. Protests have erupted in Minneapolis after multiple controversial federal immigration actions, including multiple controversial shootings by immigration and enforcement agents. Demonstrations intensified after another person was wounded in a federal enforcement operation. Trump's threat. President Trump took to social media and public statements warning he might invoke the Insurrection Act, an 1807 law allowing the U.S. government to deploy active-duty troops domestically in extraordinary situations if local leaders cannot control protesters. Governor's appeal. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, D., responded by urging Trump to turn the temperature down, calling for an end to what he described as a campaign of retribution. He appealed for peaceful protest and warned against escalating the situation with military threats. Governor's call for peace. Walz also encouraged residents to protest loudly, urgently, but also peacefully, stressing that violence and chaos would only make the situation worse. Political context. Use of the Insurrection Act has been rare. It was last invoked in the early 1990s to respond to riots. Deploying troops without state consent could trigger legal battles, political backlash, and questions about federal overreach. Impact significance. This standoff highlights deep divisions between federal and state leadership, touching on immigration enforcement, use of federal force at home, and the balance of constitutional powers, all at a moment when public trust in institutions is fragile. Outro. Can the president use military force inside the U.S., and should he? Share your views below and subscribe to One America Daily for authoritative coverage of U.S. politics and national security. Comment trigger question. Should the federal government ever use the military to respond to domestic protests, or does that undermine constitutional rights?